he has really lost it.
When that vision is a water slide that can terrify the world.
Oh, God!
From heights never before seen.
Oh, God!
In 2013, people noticed that Schlitterbahn, Kansas City, was building something huge. A massive tower that dwarfed the Kansas water park. A huge tower with stairs wrapped all around it. Alongside this was a series of supports, which led downwards to the rest of a slide section. This was the beginnings of VERRÜKT, what would eventually become known as the world's tallest water slide. As the construction of the ride became a bit of a joke, it started in 2013, and in 2014 it was still being built, and the construction dragged on and on and on. Rumours circulated on forums that the ride wasn't open because rafts were becoming airborne on the second hill. It looks a bit like an Airtime hill, and apparently people were saying there was a bit too much airtime, but there was no evidence of this, no footage of this, nothing. It was just a bit of a rumour on the forums at the time. In May 2014, people had noticed that the ride had been reprofiled. By comparing pictures from before and after, you could see that the second hill had been reprofiled, the first drop didn't go down as low as it did before. People noticed things were happening, but nobody was sure what was going on and when the ride would open.
Sky Tracker flew over VERRÜKT as this afternoon as rafts were sent down with sandbags in them for the wait. Now, today was supposed to be the first day for media rides, but once again, glitches have caused delays. Brenda Lisa Gonzalez is live near the park. And Brenda Lisa, what are people saying? Were they still going to ride this thing?
On June the 28th, 2014, Schlitterbahn Water Parks released a video POV showing just how crazy the ride was, with a really impressive first drop. In July 2014, a Travel Channel special called Extreme Water Parks was released and aired on TV, which featured the design and construction of VERRÜKT. Went all the way through the construction. However, that seems to have been wiped from the internet since the incident, which we'll go on to. However, I've managed to find a copy of it, but it seems like they've tried to wipe it from the internet for obvious reasons. This TV show, it showed the design and construction, but it showed they were quite innovative and resourceful with how they built the ride itself. The bit I was quite interested in was the tower. The main tower was built out of tanker carriages from a train, so the big circular tanks cut into sections and then welded end to end to build the tall tower, rather than building it from brand new steel, which is quite a good way of doing it, really. After being postponed 3 times, the ride's opening date was finally announced as Thursday the 10th of July 2014.
Finally happening right now. After weeks of delays, the very first riders are braving the world's tallest water slide.
It opens with 3 rider boats with full 3-point seatbelts, so it had an over-the-shoulder seatbelt, which you don't see too often on any kind of ride, never mind a water ride.
The ride now holds just 3 riders aged 14 and up that must weigh less than 550 pounds combined. And I can tell you that this is definitely not for the faint of heart.
It also opened with safety netting covering the entire ride and some sort of trim braking on the first drop. It had like sort of 2 bars at the side that sort of squeezed the boats a little bit. And it also looked like at one point they added like extra friction by adding like it had like a rubber sort of mat on the bottom of the slide, which wasn't there all the way through, but it seems like they put some kind of method of slowing it down because it must have been a bit too fast. It also opened with really strict rider weight limits, and there was a 150 kilogram window that the 3 riders had to fit within that window, and 1 person couldn't weigh too much out of the 3 people. So you had to have the right combination of people, and and I believe you were weighed at the bottom of the lift, at the bottom of the stairs and at the top to make sure that the right combination was in the boat. They also enforced a minimum rider age of 14 years old, apparently checking ID to make sure that you were young enough to go on the ride, which is crazy. So, VERRÜKT was open to the public. The requirements for riders was constantly adjusting. The weight limits were going up and down. I believe there was age limits that were going up and down. It was all changing constantly. I believe there was also height limits, so there's quite a lot of restrictions that were constantly changing while they sort of learned the ride restrictions as they went along. So people who visited the parks complained quite a lot about slow operations. The park also, at the start, had a pre-booking system, so you couldn't go on the ride unless you pre-booked. Apparently with sort of like a 2-hour wait, so you'd book and then 2 hours later you could go on the ride. Apparently it's due to how popular the ride was, but there was a lot of complaints about the really slow operations and throughput of the ride. So, after that point, sort of, I don't live in the US, so for a while, there was nothing I really heard about the ride. It sort of went quiet. I watched a POV online. It looked crazy, looked really high. But then there was a big long gap that where nothing seemed to really happen. It went quiet. The ride was there. That was it. It was built to smash records and get the Schlitterbahn parks on the map. It did that, but it didn't seem to resonate worldwide that much. And I didn't really hear much about it since then. The forums I was looking at the updates of the ride on sort of went dead not long after it was opened. I've not really had much opinions about what it was like. Did you go on it? I don't know. People who said it was a bit crazy, but some people said it was a bit underwhelming. I don't know. But it went quiet from that point. On the 8th of August 2016, a tragedy occurred.
We are learning more this evening about the 10-year-old boy who died while on a water slide at a water park here in the U.S. in Kansas City, Kansas. The slide is the tallest in the world. Going down the slide, you can reach speeds of nearly 70 miles an hour. 10-year-old Caleb Schwab was there with his parents and 3 brothers. His father is a state representative.
The accident shocked everybody. VERRÜKT, a ride in a water park, a place that's supposed to be about family fun, had killed somebody and injured other people. Now, as I make this video, it's April 2018. The legal situation is still ongoing, so there's not actually a full verdict on what's happened yet, so I can't say too much. Investigations are still ongoing. The ride still stands. However, it's been announced that when the investigation is complete, the ride's going to be demolished completely. So with the legalities, the main people who are involved are Jeff Henry, the Schlitterbahn co-owner, John Schooley, I don't know how you pronounce that, the ride designer, and Tyler Miles, who's the former park operations manager. Theme park accidents do happen. They shouldn't happen, but they do happen. And what I find so shocking about this is the fact that the VERRÜKT water slide was designed and built in-house, and the entire process was filmed for the Travel Channel series called Extreme Water Parks. So you'd hope during that whole process that something would ensure that ride was 100% safe. You'd hope that there was no way that something like this could happen. Like I say, accidents do happen, but you'd hope that it would be a lot less likely to happen and not so severe. But when you watch the Travel Channel show, you can see just how much improvisation happens with the project, and it's kind of shocking, really. The design process seems to start by them. They did some like engineering drawings, and then they built a to scale prototype, which was sort of like a smaller scale ride. I think it still had full size boats, but it was like a smaller ride, and they used that to test to ensure that the boats behaved how they wanted to, the speed was okay, and I think they also used it to test different types of boats. During construction, they faced quite a few different problems. One of those problems is really shocking, and it's in the Travel Channel show, and it's where a boat full on leaves the flume and flies into the air and then comes crashing down onto the floor. It's really shocking that they left that footage in the TV show. and it really shows that there's some kind of poor understanding of physics or what they were sort of undertaking, because unless that was done on purpose for publicity, it's worrying that something like that would happen on a water slide. After this incident, it prompts them to redesign the bottom of the first drop and the first and only hill. It seems like what they ended up doing was making the first drop a bit shorter so that it didn't go as low down to the floor, and then they reduced how sharp it went into the first hill, so it kind of lowered the speed a bit and made it a bit of a smoother transition into the hill, and made the hill less of an airtime hill. It made it more of a normal sort of hill. The second hill gets reprofiled. It goes from a 45-degree angle to a 22-degree, much softer angle for the hill. The modifications, I imagine, took a lot of time and money to do, because the ride was complete and then they had to reprofile it quite a lot before it opened. The attitude of Jeff and the other people involved in designing the ride is quite disturbing when you look back at the footage.
Our goal on this ride is to fly in the air. We want people to actually fly. It fell backwards, tipped over, and killed every sandbag in there. Whoa!
It shows the entire process of the ride being designed and built and all the problems that it have, and it finishes right when the ride is undergoing final testing. It's interesting, kind of eye-opening, and it has a bit of American dramatics thrown in as well. Disturbingly, the grand jury indictment is saying that Jeff Henry lacked the technical expertise needed to build VERRÜKT, and ignored warnings from consultants who said the ride was not safe while he rushed a timeline to build a thrill ride meant to impress producers of a cable television show. To me, this feels like a case of a ride being built to break records and get on TV, to get a lot of publicity for Schlitterbahn water parks. They wanted to make Schlitterbahn water parks the king of the water park industry, but it seems like they may have done this by cutting corners. We don't know this for sure. The case is still ongoing, but it seems to me like there was something like that going on to cause something like this to happen. They're also accused of covering up evidence, with rumours of staff at the water park being threatened about talking to anybody about the incident. However, this is just speculation at this stage, just rumours that I've seen in news articles. It's terrible that a young boy would lose his life at a water park, and hopefully this never happens again. It should never happen. It should have never happened in the first place. So there's not much else to say about this story. It's still ongoing. We'll get a verdict at some point, but I thought I'd talk about a bit of the history about the ride and what's happened, and yeah, it's quite worrying. And if you get a bit of time, I'd watch the Extreme Water Park show. It is cool seeing a ride get built, but it's kind of horrible looking back at it and knowing that the result of that is somebody's death and injuries of people too. So yeah, hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching. Adventures in Airtime out!